Welcome back to Business Matters with me, Devina Gupta, on the BBC World Service. In this half hour, we have our guests from Malaysia and the US, and we will be talking about the trouble facing the world's largest crypto exchange, Binance. And we find out how the crypto world is reacting to it. We also take a look at the future of podcast markets in the US. We have Jessica Kine, who is a corporate advisor for a boutique firm, Astris Advisory, joining us from Malaysia, and Andy Euler, who is an energy journalist. So before we get to our guests, we were earlier talking about digital twins and what if AI creates one, and both Andy and Jessica have said that, well, they are perfect in their own world. They don't need one. I, for one, wanted a little bit two horns on my head and perhaps a slimmer version of me. And the reason why we were talking about this is because of the news that got us thinking about films where actors have double roles or dual roles. So films like Parent Trap, where Lindsay Lohan plays the role of twins who are separated, and Tom Hardy in the 70s movie Legend, where he has a double role as a gangster. And all these films come to a point of a debate which is happening in Hollywood, where imagine instead of actors, AI is used to create these double roles or digital doubles for these actors. Should these actors be paid for it then? That's the crux of argument that Hollywood's largest union, SAG-AFTRA, is making. Now, SAG-AFTRA is the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. And we have now the National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, who's joining us here. Duncan, thank you for being with us. It's not often we get people from Hollywood to be with us, so thank you for adding the glitz and glamour to the World Business Report. But let's get straight into it then. What's the argument here? Could you explain what this case is all about?
Sure, and thanks so much, Davina, for the chance to be on with you. Really appreciate that. So basically the argument here is if you're going to use technology to create a digital double, to create a voice model or a model of someone's likeness, and then use it to create a new performance, that should only be done with the informed consent of that person and also with fair compensation to them. Because for actors, their image, their voice, their persona, that's their stock in trade. That's what they use to make their living. And if you try to take that from them without fair compensation, it's wrong. It's a violation of their integrity and their right to their own control, their own image and likeness. But it's also basically stealing what they have spent years to develop in their career. And so we think it's clear that that fair compensation and informed consent are required anytime you're going to make a digital double of someone.
I mean, on a fair point, consent is perhaps something which the critics said is, critics are saying, yes, it is fair enough that you take consent. But the other side of the argument is that it seems like paying a clerk for the work that a computer is doing. Why should there be a financial compensation for this?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you were going to just create a synthetic performer who isn't a real person, then that might be a fair argument. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is actual real life people whose image and likeness are being taken and used to create a performance. And so there's a reason that their image or likeness is being used. It's because they've built up a fan base. They're popular. People want to see things that they're in. And all of that has been done over the course of an entire career. So it's really not fair for someone to say, oh, it's just the value of a clerk's time to control an AI tool, just like a brand, just like any kind of copyrighted or intellectual property. The property right that our members have in their image and their likeness and the goodwill they've built up with the whole public over the course of a many years career, it's worth something and it needs to be compensated for.
What are the Hollywood studios saying to this argument?
Well, largely, I think they're in agreement. All the examples that I can think of where digital doubles have been used have been done with consent and with compensation. And that ranges from examples like James Earl Jones's voice model being used for the newer editions of the Book of Boba Fett, for example. It also includes other examples outside of the Star Wars universe, like Paul Walker in the Fast and Furious series of movies. So there has been a practice developing in Hollywood that is consistent with the philosophy that we're putting out there.
But ethically, there's also a concern here, Duncan, because there have been also arguments around that if this sort of digital version of actors is allowed, then they could be earning money shooting an advertisement or doing multiple projects all at the same time, because obviously that actor can be present at multiple locations for multiple projects with this kind of digital version. Is it fair for the fans?
Well, I think the fans deserve to know when there is a digital version being used for something like that. So absolutely, that's a question. But I will point out, hundreds of thousands of people have gone to see ABBA Voyage in London, which is, of course, composed of the four members of ABBA, digital versions of them performing a concert every day. And I think if you went and asked any of the fans outside of that performance, was it worth it to them to pay for a ticket to see that, they would give you an enthusiastic yes. So I do think that where it allows for the creation of work that otherwise couldn't be done due to scheduling conflicts or due to any other reason, it's a net benefit to the fans and it's a benefit to the performer and to the industry.
So it seems that we are getting closer to this technology as well. How far is this future then?
That's a great question. Well, so much has happened over the last year to 18 months in terms of generative artificial intelligence technology. It's really hard to say, but I think it's developing very, very rapidly. And so I do expect the capabilities of that generative AI tools for audiovisual work, like film and television work, to be advancing a lot over the next, 12, 24, 36 months.
All right, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator for SAG-AFTRA. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thanks,
Duncan.
Davina.
And before we let you go, Duncan, just one question. Yes. We've been talking about your digital twin. If it had to be one, would it be the same as you, or would you like some sort of improvisations there?
Oh, if I had a chance to do a digital double myself, I definitely would make a few tweaks. Definitely make some improvements.
All right. Thanks, Duncan. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Well, getting back to Andy and Jessica there then. Andy, we've been talking about this before as well, but the advent of artificial intelligence and this kind of technology in other fields as well.
Sure.
What kind of sort of fears, I would say, you live with as a journalist that someday there could be a digital twin for Andy and an AI that could do that job as well?
No, it's a perfectly valid and especially in the context of the conversation that we've been having this evening, it's a good conversation to have. It's funny, I was dealing today with, and this feels almost prophetic, right? So I'm a part of this. I'm a fellow at Columbia University in New York, and I was reading, we have a bunch of Slack channels, and we were talking in the nuclear, because it's a whole bunch of energy and environment stuff that I work on. And in the nuclear Slack channel, somebody had actually put into ChatGPT the suggestion of writing a paper about the implications of what the nuclear industry is going to look like in the next 20 years or something like that. And so what ended up happening was, in about 10 seconds, a bot wrote a paper, and then we all sort of read the paper.
Wow. And
it was really kind of troubling. The bot got a lot of it right. And so a lot of the scholars were sort of taken aback, and then of course started adapting and asking what different scholars, if you ask the robot what different scholars would think about the nuclear industry, what would they say? And the bot actually adapted to sort of the knowledge of what other experts had said on the topic and things like that. It's pretty amazing, and it's pretty intimidating. I'm not going to lie to you, because of course we think as human beings, it's like, oh, of course they're not going to be able to write like us. They're not going to be, the bots aren't going to be able to sort of think and nuance and understand what these different arguments are doing. And then you go and you read papers that are generated in 10 seconds on an industry that you think you kind of know pretty well, having studied it for the last 5-10 years. It's pretty intimidating.
Absolutely. I mean, it's intimidating to an extent. There have been open letters written involving industry experts from
Sure.
Google as well, where the top line has been that artificial intelligence could lead to human extinction. I mean, those kind of red, glaring warnings have been there. But Jessica, do you see this change happening in Malaysia? Because are there jobs that are at risk already?
Impacted by AI adversely, Davina?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
At the moment, not yet, but I think there'll be a huge avalanche of adverse impact across many, many sectors and across the globe. So I fear for journalism. I fear for education. I worry about standards. ChatGPT seems to be being allowed by various educational institutions and curriculum boards. I am worried that it will just lead to a sort of a very broad dumbing down. That's, I'm afraid, an old auntie's worry.
But then, if this is the world that we're going towards, do you agree with Duncan's argument, which he's making for Hollywood at least, that if there is a replication of the kind of knowledge which is there right now, say with professors or with journalists, then there should be fair compensation as well given to them? Do you agree to that argument, Jessica?
If it's applied across sectors, yes. If it's applied across sectors. But then the problem with the crossover with AI usage is it's got to be extremely clear as to, for example, either digital doubles or, if you're in journalism, to how do you keep a badge on your output and what is the badge for the AI output, right? I mean, the differentiation is going to be crucial. And that's why I'm really worried that the only people winning out in this war are going to be lawyers and litigation services, right? Around the world, across so many different sectors. That is my deep concern.
Andy, what's your view on this?
No. It's a really good point. Jessica makes a great point because you're thinking about, of course, if you're thinking like a journalist, you're thinking, okay, well, where am I getting this information? Who are my sources? Where is sort of the application of all of this knowledge? And then again, if the robots are doing it and they're sourcing, what is the sort of differentiation between what I'm doing and what this AI is sort of able to do? So making that differentiation is going to be really, really tough. And then asking your bosses and asking the folks who are consuming this content to compensate you for it. Man, that sounds like an ask. I mean, I'm glad I'm not there yet, but it sounds like we're kind
It's a
of
better
inching
world
that
we
way.
live in. It's a better world we live in. All right. Well,